Hi Kalpesh. Hi Venkat.
Hello, Vamshi.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hi.
Good
hi
afternoon.
Vamshi,
Good
hi
afternoon.
everyone.
Yeah. Hello,
Yes.
everyone.
Hi. So I hope my voice is clear.
Yeah,
If
loud
they
and
are
clear.
loud and clear, thank you very much for the confirmation. So, I'm going to take the further on the slides on what are the updates of 4.0. It's a much awaited standard since long. It's been 2 years. People are talking about I always used to receive so many mails and messages when this will come out. Finally March 31st we got the new standard, and in fact this is very the major change happened in 4.0 as we anticipating since long. Okay, coming to the this particular session, please let me tell you one thing. In this session, we are going to discuss about the critical changes, whatever happened, happened in the 4.0, because this very small, 1 hour, 2 hours is not enough to discuss in a very lengthy. So probably we are, just want to highlight the very evolving changes in the standard. So people will come to know what is the major changes in the standard. But however, there are a lot of changes happened at a different levels. Like most of the time, it's a sometimes they provided the clarification, sometimes they changed the terminologies and etc. We as much as possible we are going to cover those, but definitely we are coming up with a full session on understanding each requirement as per the 4.0. So further, thanks for attending this webinar, and any questions you please put up in the chat box, and as well as we try to answer all your questions, for your questions, and we will try to explain all the major changes in the standard. Okay, coming to the session, this is a 4.0. After 3.2.1, this is a 4.0, as most of the people are aware. This is the global standard. It's a baseline for providing the baseline standard for the requirements, technical requirement and operational requirements to protect the payments data across global level. So this is the latest version is 4.0. Very important. What is the main goal of this PCI DSS? Is basically, this is actually majorly there are 4 goals. One is continue to meet the requirement, security needs of the current standard, and also promote security continuous process, promoting security as a continuous process. And also in this particular 4.0, they're given more flexibility and different methodologies, and enhance the security requirements also. When it comes to this continue to meet security needs, basically they are expanded the multi-factor authentication in the requirement 8, authentication requirements, and as well as the password authentication, password update requirements. Requirements are updated in the passwords, and very important for the new e-commerce and phishing requirements to address ongoing threats. So this is basically some of the examples which I can provide in continue to meet security requirement. Promote security as a continuous process. Now this particular standard is clearly assigned. Earlier standard, even though there was certain requirements are given, but this time in 4.0, they emphasize on assigning roles and responsibilities for each of the requirement. Okay, so this is one of the change happened here. And also guidelines, also there is a lot of guidance provided to help the organization to better understanding the requirements and how to implement and focus on the security. So this is also very important. Further, in the reporting instructions, reporting options, actually they made an option to provide areas of improvements and also more transparency in the report reviewers. So basically, like earlier, it was like whether it is yes or no, and how the particular requirement in place implemented within the organization. But now in the reporting options, they are highlighting where that organization could improvise the specific security requirements. So this is basically as a promoting security as a continuous process. They made some changes in the standard. Further, flexibility in the organizations, because here there is very major change happened. That is uh, current standard providing more flexibility to the organizations to implement the specific requirements of the PCI DSS. That is what they call it as a customized approach. So this is one of the major change. Earlier it was like if you look at the 3.2.1, it is mainly on this is the requirement, this is the kind of a controls the organization is supposed to implement. And even as an assessor company, we also follow the specific testing procedures to address how the organizations are implemented the specific requirements, whether they are compliant or non-compliant. But now in the customized approach, so it is much more on the organization can depends on the objectivity. The organization can provide and provide another option for the organizations to using different methods to achieve the security objectives or the specific requirement of the security requirements of the PCI DSS standard. As well as a QSA assessors also, they can see, they can evaluate what kind of methods the organizations are implemented to achieve the intent of the objective of the requirement, and also how to evaluate whether it is in up to the adequate enough to protect that security, and as well as how they can meet the specific requirements. So this is one of the customized methodology now they defined, and organization can definitely they can choose which one they want to go for that. Okay. Also, validation methods and procedures, also enhanced validation methods and procedures. So these are the major goals of the PCI DSS. Now, going forward, we will discuss about how this particular standard is, in fact, addressed all these parts, right? Let me go through that. Now, let us first discuss about implementation timelines for 4.0. 4.0. This is initially, as everybody is aware, the official release of 4.0 with the validation documents, it's happened 31st March 2022. Now, in the second quarter, this is the first quarter just finished. In the second quarter, the PCI Council initiate the trainings for the internal security assessors and as well as the QSA companies, and also they may release the other supporting documents in the quarter two. So now we receiving request for about getting the certifications on 4.0. So till the time in the after quarter two, then only any as a QSA companies we can provide the certifications as per 4.0, because as of now all the QSs are only qualified for earlier version, that is 3.2.1. So apart from that, definitely after quarter two, the council will start trainings and everything. And then actually the transition period from 3.2.1 to 4.0, every organization get minimum 2 years. If you look at the slide where you can see 31st March 2024, the 3.2.1 will be retired. So after 31st March 2024, every organization, if they are going for the kind of assessment, it is based on the 4.0 only. So obviously the organization can get 2 years transition period to implement the latest version of the standard. Okay. And also if you look at the new 4.0, there are some requirements, some controls, they are become effective from till 31st March 2025, because these are some specific future dated new requirements also added now. So obviously it's almost like 3 years from now, the organization can implement the requirements. Okay. So The basic dates, what you can remember is 31st March 2024, organization can, implement the 4.0. They have time, 4.0 implementation till 2024 March. And before that, yes, organization can choose whether it's a 3.2.1 or 4.0, depends on their readiness. But remember, after 2024 March, every organization they are supposed to assess it as per the 4.0 only. Okay. Now coming to the main security objectives of the requirements, PCI DSS. If you look at that, there are not much change except in the second objective earlier, according to the 3.2.1, it's called as a product cardholder data. Now it is protect accounts data. So accounts data, most of the people aware, the accounts data is something which is a combination of, cardholder data and as well as the sensitive authentication data. But earlier, the name itself is a protect cardholder data only. But now they just changed it from cardholder data to accounts data. But rest of the 6 security objectives remain same. However, yes, within the security objectives, the requirements and sub requirements has been changed. I mean, certain things are changed already, but yes, security objectives remain same. Now coming to the 12 requirements, 12 requirements. One is the install and maintain. Please remember, these are the only the name of the requirements, headings of the requirements of 3.2.1, 4.0. So if you look at that, install and maintain a firewall configuration to protect cardholder data. This is the earlier what they say. But now if you look at that, it became install and maintain network security controls. So the firewalls and the routers and switches, whatever it is, now they moved from that. They changed the terminology. It become now network security controls. Yeah. And second requirement earlier, it is like do not use vendor supplied defaults for system passwords and other security parameters. But now they're talking about apply secure configuration to all system components. So it is not only when you look at the previous requirement, it is mostly focusing on vendor supplied defaults only. I mean, it's related to the passwords, right? But if you look at now, it's more aligned to apply secure configurations to all system components, whether it is a network devices, whether it is a server systems, whether it is a desktops, whether it is application, anything, it's applied to all the system components. This is one of the one of the clarity which they are given, and also even the requirements also they stated like that. Third requirement, protect stored cardholder data. As just I mentioned, now they're actually replaced that cardholder data with the accounts data. So it is applicable for both SAD and as well as the cardholder data CHD. Okay. This is the third requirement. And fourth one is encrypt transmission of cardholder data across open and public networks. Even though the requirement remains same, but if you look at the fourth requirement now, they changed it to protect cardholder data with a strong cryptography. This is the strong cryptography is one of the things which they are highlighting right now. So earlier it is encryption, but they didn't not much emphasize on whether there's a strong or what kind of encryption. But yes, now they are talking about strong cryptography must be used for during any transmission of cardholder data in the open and public networks. Earlier, yes, the protect all system against malware and regularly update antivirus softwares or programs. This is the fifth requirement as per the 3.2.1. But now protect all systems and networks from malicious software. So this is one of the requirement now. So it is not only the systems, and even they added the network as well. Okay. Develop and maintain secure systems and applications. Now, again, they're talking about develop and maintain secure systems and softwares. So basically, if you see that there is a what I can see that the council actually developed a latest standard that is a secure software frameworks like So that's where they more emphasize on the, instead of the applications, they emphasize on the softwares, payment software. So now I can see there is some alignment between the DSS and the SSF standards. So now they changed it from applications to softwares. So develop and maintain security systems and applications earlier. Now it became develop and maintain secure systems and softwares. Restrict access to cardholder data by business need to know. Yes, the similar, but now actually it's not about only the cardholder data. Even they are extended that to the system components as well. Restrict access to system components and cardholder data by business need to know. So this is one of the change. It is a new element. The system components has been added here. Identify and authenticate access to system components. Now, identify and authenticate. There is a little maybe because I think they want to more provide the clarity, clarification about this, particularly this requirement, because identify, authenticate access to system components. Now they made it very clearly identify the users, even though the intention is same, the objective is same in the earlier versions also, but what I guess while reading this, what I understand is they want to give more clarity with respect to the the way they're putting up the requirements very clearly now. So there is no any ambiguity in the statements. So identify users and authenticate them to access to the system component. So this is what they want to make it very clear. And ninth requirement, there is not much any change. It's the same name, restrict physical access to cardholder data. Now also restrict physical access to cardholder data. Further, the 10th requirement of 3.2.1 is track and monitor all access to network resources and cardholder data. Now, log and monitor all access to system components and cardholder data. So earlier it was only focused on the network resources, but now I guess log and monitor all access to system components and cardholder data. Further, 11th requirement of 3.2.1 is regularly test security systems and processes. Now test security systems and networks regularly, they mentioned here. And very important, the last one is maintain a policy that addresses information security for all personnel's information security policy. But now they're more on the support information security within organization policy and programs. If you look at all these, the requirement wise, the changes, what I can see, there is a good amount of requirements. I mean, they try to provide very clear statements and clear cut expectations through this. Okay. Yes, the major change, what we discussed so far is the security objectives, what kind of a change, and the requirement wise at a high level requirement names, that there are some changes on that level. And also now the two approaches which just I touched upon, the PCI DSS compliance now can be happen in two approaches. One is the defined approach, another one is the customized approach. So let us discuss about what is this defined approach and what is the customized approach. If you look at the 3.2.1, there was no such thing. What kind of approach? It is very straightforward. There is a requirement. There are some guidance and testing procedures. Organizations and even the assessor companies, they're supposed to follow that testing procedures to confirm whether the specific requirements have been implemented or compliant or non-compliant. Okay. Now, when it comes to the 4.0, there is a choice. There is an option for the organization to choose what kind of approach they want to implement to meet the specific requirements of the PCI DSS. Okay, let us discuss further on this. When it's like a traditional approach, what we can see that earlier 3.2.1, there are entities, organization can directly implement the PCI requirements and the controls as they mentioned in the standard. That is one part. And even as assessors, we stick to that particular testing procedures to test the particular controls and confirm whether they are in place or not in place. Whereas in the customized approach, the organization, the entities can select a specific control as per their environment and verify the risk and analyze the risk, and accordingly they can implement different controls to meet that security of the security. So in the customized approach, it's more like the organization get little bit of flexibility to define their controls to meet the specific objective of that particular requirement. So this is what I can see that. But however, what we need to understand here is every control is not actually PCI. Every control is not having any customized approach also. So wherever there is no customized approach is mentioned, there you have to use defined approach only to check the particular control. So I hope it's clear, right? Okay. Yeah. So
Vamshi, just one question here. Okay.
yes.
So we spoke about defined versus customized approach, and people can choose, or entities can choose. Can we choose, like, can we have a customized approach as well as defined approach, both or either, or how does it work in case if there is a section where there is a control requirement which requires one section to be in defined and one to be in customized? So how, what provisions are provided?
Yeah, definitely. You see, actually here, the organization will get both options to implement. I like it's, for example, there is a section, there is a particular requirement wherein the organization can choose which approach they want to implement. Like they can choose it as a defined approach. For example, there is not much, there are already existing practices are there, and the direct requirements they can meet, what they can meet through the defined approach. Yes, they can choose the defined approach. If there are some places in one requirement, there is a defined approach and customized approach, the organization, they can choose whether they can go with the defined approach or they can go with the customized approach. So it means there is a flexibility for the organization, but at the same time, as an assessor companies, we can see if there is a defined approach, we have to choose the testing procedures from the direct standard. But when it comes to the organization selected the customized approach, then we have to define our own testing procedures to validate that customized controls. So this is how it is. So it is up to the organization for one particular control, either they can choose defined approach they want to implement or the customized approach they want to implement.
Okay.
Okay. So sorry. So the customized approach, if you see this, entity identifies validation path, whether they can choose entity designs and implement controls that meets the objective of the PCI DSS requirement. So it depends on the objective. They can choose, they can design the controls, and they can choose a different control, customized validation. Then how they meet the specific objective of the control. This is very important. And as assessors also, we need to define our own testing procedures to test that particular controls, whether they are meeting the specific objective or not. It means the customized approach, it definitely it will increase some, the efforts from assessor's point of view. Also, even organization point of view. When it comes to the defined approach, is simply they can choose the organization implement all the controls as mentioned in the PCI DSS standard, and directly assessor perform the assessment as mentioned in the PCI DSS standard basis on the testing procedure. So it is more like existing what we normally do in 3.2.1 for the organizations. Okay. So these are the two. This is one of the major change between 3.2.1 to 4.0. Now the organization getting two approaches. It is up to them which approach they can choose for each controls. I mean to say, It's not like, suppose there is a one organization, they choose a customized approach, they have to stick to the customized approach only. They can't, go with the defined approach. At the same time, if one organization, they choose a defined approach, it's not like that for particular controls, control particular requirements, they should not go for the, customized approach. So it is a combination of both. The organization can choose for each control, each requirement, each entire whole standard also. So depends on that. The assessor supposed to use their own testing procedures on their own, or maybe it is as per mentioned in the standard itself. Yeah, so this is what generally it bases on the defined approach. Already we discussed that is the same, just like a 3.2.1, but in the customized approach, the organization depends on the risk appetite and the risk on the particular controls, and they can choose their own methods to own controls to protect the specific objectives. There is absolutely, as I mentioned, customized approach, there is no written testing procedures for the assessors to follow. So whatever the organization is already implemented, the assessor companies can derive their own testing procedures to validate that objective. So ultimately, our aim is to whether the specific objective of the requirement has been met or not by implementing all the controls. I can see. Yeah, I can. Someone is asked. Okay, fine. So the answer someone is asking, like whether is it something like a risk-based audit approach? Yes, absolutely right. That's what generally we are also. I can see that it is a kind of a risk-based audit or risk-based control system. So depends on the risk, you can choose what kind of a controls you want to implement to meet that objectives. Yes, it is like a mostly it is aligned with some other global standards, like kind of ISO type. ISO also, there is objective based control, objective basis. Yes, this is what actually I think these are more or like they're working on the objectives and control objectives, and basis on the risk appetite, risk analysis, they can choose what kind of controls they should implement to mitigate that kind of a risk. And as a assessor companies, they can also choose what kind of they can define their own testing procedures to validate the specific controls to see whether it is meeting the specific objective or not. So I think this is one of the major change happened.
Okay, yeah, Kalpesh here. So with respect to these changes and what we've spoken about defined and customized approach, so is there any change in sampling as well, the approach to sampling or the testing procedures, what was defined in 3.2.1?
Actually, in the sampling wise, actually, it's not very that kind of references removed from the 4.0 because what is happening, you see, when the sampling depends on the environment, what kind of a sampling methods we should use. It is actually given that option to the assessor companies only, because one sampling approach cannot be applied to all the types of organizations. It's not fit for all the organization. Mandatory, it's not mandatory. Sometimes, how I can look at this, some testing procedures you cannot take the samples. For example, a network diagram, up-to-date network diagram, because it is not a sampling, right? So sometimes, there are roles and responsibilities, and there are certain requirements you cannot take the samples there, but depends on the testing procedures or maybe the type of a requirement, you can choose the sample. So it is what I can see, there is no reference of sampling is given in the 4.0. But when it comes to the assessment approach, as a QSA companies, they can choose appropriate samples, depends on the population, what they're testing, and basis on that, they can take the decision on this. But there is no absolutely there is no they mentioned this much percent of samplings to be taken or something like this. They have not given something like this, and they didn't even refer any of the sampling related things. So the conclusion is, I mean, as far as my understanding, in a personal opinion, is that the sampling can be derived basis on the complexity of the organization and the scope and complexity of the environment which they're actually assessing. Okay, so I think that's from my side. Okay. So yeah, I mean, you say if when I see the recent changes, there are actually three types of changes. I can see that. Okay, one is evolving requirement. It's a evolving requirement, and the second one is the clarifications and guidance, something like this, and structure or format. So basically, if you look at that, ensure the standard is up to date. I mean, the evolving requirements is nothing but the new changes, the changes in the standard, particularly depends on the recent trends in the market and emerging threats landscape, technologies changes. So technologies changes, they chosen to cover all these things in the evolving requirements. So you can see wherever there is a possibility, they have added the new requirements into the standard, and as well as they expanded the scope of the applicability of the controls to other system components as well. That's, I can see that very clearly. In other change type is the clarification and guidance, wherein let's say explanation and some kind of additional guidance has been provided. This is how I can see the categorization in the 4.0. One is the evolving requirement, it is the new things added. Clarification guidance is added, another type of a change happened. And the structure or format is reorganizing the content, because sometimes they actually merged few of the statements, requirements in the standard, and separated certain things. So it is like just a structural change or formatting change only, nothing major with respect to, but ultimately the intent of the standard remains same. So this is what I can see the type of changes here. There are three types of changes: evolving requirements, clarifications or guidance provided, that kind of a changes, and formatting changes, structure or formatting changes. Okay, the new requirements in overall, because this section, as I mentioned earlier, this webinar want to be very small session. So we can't, we are not in a position to explain each and every change, each and every control of the standard in this particular session. So going forward, what we are going to do is, like, we are going to discuss only the new requirements which are added or provided some clarification in this particular standard, and latter part of the maybe couple of weeks, we will come out with more explanations on each requirements and with respect to the 4.4. So coming to there are around 64 in total the changes, the new requirements are added. Out of the 64, around 13 requirements are immediate effective from using 4.0. It means from now onwards, the organization who are implementing 4.0, they have to take up all these 13 requirements, and the rest of the 51 requirements, the changes in the 4.0 standard also, it is very clearly mentioned. They are called it, as on today, they are called it as a best practices till March 2025. It means once the PCI B version 3.2.1 is retired, this became a mandatory requirements. Okay, so up to maybe there will be some minor updates in 4.1. Let us see. Now, let us get into the more in details of the changes, especially from the account data element storage, because earlier, as I mentioned, it is more focused on the cardholder data. I can see that because here, if you look at that, it's very clearly mentioned. The storage is permitted or not permitted. Okay, and the stored data unreadable or not unreadable. So this is a kind of a differentiation. But if you look at that now, it is more applicable for the accounts data. If PAN should be rendered unreadable according to the PCI DSS, this is the latest 3.5.1, right? Sensitive authentication data must not be stored after authorization, even if encrypted. This is the earlier statement only. But however, this applies even for environments where there is no PAN data present, because this clarification which they have provided, because earlier it's not, I mean, PAN, whether sometimes we also used to get a kind of a questions like, hey, we are not using PAN, then what is the why sensitive authentication data might be like a CVV, it's a 3-digit number, how relevant it is to not store SAD, even I don't have the PAN. So I mean, this is kind of a questions we used to get it from the organizations, entities, so they are implemented. So now actually they're given very clear statement here, even though you are storing the PAN data or not, it doesn't make any much difference. But if you are storing even the sensitive authentication data before authorization, also you need to encrypt it. That's very simple. And strong cryptography, yes, this is a 3.3.2 talks about any sensitive authentication data you are storing before authorization, it should be encrypted. Now, sorry, minimum storage time, storage time, because storage restrictions is kept to minimum, storage is kept to minimum timelines. So this is what actually I can see that. So storage of sensitive authentication data prior to completion of authorization is kept to minimum as per 3.2.1. Rest of the things remain same, not much changes here. Okay. Now let us see what changes they made in the specific requirements. Requirement one, if you look at that earlier, as I mentioned, the new requirement talks about network security controls. This is what actually, instead of the firewalls and routers, they very clearly mentioned now it is applicable to network security control. Second thing, description of groups. Earlier it was like a description of groups and roles and responsibilities, but it is only restricted to management of networks and components. But now this is one of the requirement, as I mentioned, roles and responsibilities to be defined across all the requirements of the standard. So earlier 3.2.1, it is only appeared in only one place, that is in the requirement 1, and in the last 12th requirement only, the roles and responsibilities. But now this one of the requirement, it is appeared in all the requirements, like requirement 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So all these places it is appeared. So this is one of the change has happened. As I mentioned, roles and responsibilities for performing activities in requirement 2 are documented, assigned, and understood. The similar way, you can see the same requirement in roles and responsibilities for performing activities in requirement 3 are documented, assigned, and understood. So every requirement is having similar statement here. This is one of the changes happened. It means every requirement wise, the organization is supposed to choose the role and the responsibilities, and that has to be documented, or as I mentioned, role-based access control matrix or something like this, responsibility, accountability, information, something, and this has to be documented, and the roles has to be assigned, and whoever responsible for that, make sure the organization supposed to see they are fully understood the requirements. So this is one of the change here.
Vamshi, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, earlier we used to document roles and responsibilities as part of PCI. So right. How is it different now?
So you see, actually, when it comes to the earlier thing, in the first requirement, they mentioned in earlier standard who roles and responsibilities with respect to the network security only. Okay. Whoever authorized to approve the network changes, etc., that is only restricted to the network level security controls, network management. Even after that, in the 12th requirement of 3.2.1 also mentioned about please assign the specific roles and responsibilities to specific activities like log management or incident management, etc. So this is actually splitted into the only this restricted to only these two requirements. But now what they did, I mean, in the 4.0, the roles and responsibilities for performing each activity as per the requirements, like second requirement, for example, configuration. If second requirement talks about secure configuration of all system components. So the organizations now define who is responsible for this activity. Earlier, it was only network security wise they mentioned, and PCI compliance wise, there is another control, like who the official PCI officer, compliance officer, something they mentioned in the 12th requirement. But now this is mentioned in every requirement wise. Like for example, antivirus. If you look at the antivirus 5th requirement, so who is responsible for antivirus management? If
So
encryption,
granular requirements are to be
address,
be created, and
absolutely
it should be shared with the
documented.
respective stakeholders. Okay.
Absolutely right.
Got
Absolutely
your
right.
point.
Earlier, right? Every responsibility of the control requirement has to be assigned now. That needs to be communicated. So this is what they mentioned now. Okay. So that is the reason. If you look at that responsibilities, it is applied in all the controls. Like earlier, it was not like that. Now, if you look at that, the same roles and responsibilities requirement already they mentioned in the 3.1.2, 4.1.2. It means who is responsible for encrypting data while sending outside? Who is responsible in your organization? Every requirement wise, we have to, the organization is supposed to define this now. Okay. So this is apply secure configurations to all systems. In the second requirement, this is the only change, the roles and responsibility. Rest of the things is clarifications or some structural format changes only, but overall it is the same. Now protect stored accounts data. Earlier it was cardholder data, but now it is like a accounts data. If you look at the changes here, any SAD stored after SAD stored prior to authorization, kept to minimum only, because what is the intention is it is not like if sometimes the authorization may take some time, like some cases in some very hypothetical situation where the authorization takes some time, like maybe few hours. You can't you cannot say, hey, my authorization taking 1 hour, so I can keep this SAD because standard is asking. It can be kept until authorization. So it should be as per the risk. You should define what is the minimum period you can keep that SAD stored prior to authorization also. Okay. At the same time, as an organization, we have to define data retention and disposal policies for that specific time period as well. There was no such kind of requirement earlier. It was only applicable for the CHD, cardholder data. If the organization is storing cardholder data, then you have to define the retention period and define the how you delete the data after the retention period process. But now the same is applicable for even the SAD also, even not only the SAD, even if before the completion of the authorization, if you are storing that SAD, that retention has to be applied there. So this is one of the change is they're asking for that. Okay. There is some questions. Okay. Good. Second one is SAT stored electronically prior to completion of authorization is encrypted using strong cryptography. So basically it's so simple. When you are storing electronically before the authorization or before completion of the authorization, in that condition also the organization is supposed to encrypt the SAT data using strong cryptography. So this is some new change they applied here. Issuers, even stored by the issuers also, they must use strong cryptography to store this particular SAT. This requirement, if you look at this, this requirement electronically prior to completion of authorization, this requirement is the best practice until 31st March 2025. After that, this is the mandatory requirement. So you have to implement. Okay. Yeah, someone is asking like any testing methods have been changed from 3.2.1 to 4.0. If this question is related to the assessment point of view, not much change, but yes, now it's very clearly as an assessment assessors, they have to test the PCI DSS requirement through examine and observe the things and also interview the personals. It is like a last 3.2.1. I think this is the same the method. Okay, the approach is the customized approach. If you are looking at the defined and customized approach, already we discussed at that point. Even any of these both approaches, the assessor point of view, how they will confirm and how they validate the particular requirement is they have to examine the various files and configuration files and screenshots, logs, trails, audit trails, etc. They can evaluate the evidences. Second one is they can observe during the assessment how the particular controls been implemented, or the control environment, how the environment is secured, etc. And the third one is by interviewing the people who are responsible for the specific activities. They can interview the personals and how the activity is being performed, etc. So all these three different methods the assessor can use to validate the specific requirements. Thanks. Okay, coming to the 3.4 and the requirement 3, the other one is the technical controls needs to be implemented while a relocation of the PAN using any remote access technologies. This is also something the new requirement now. So that you have to put, because earlier it was like 12th requirement, they mentioned the PAN cannot be copied and tested, something like this, but now it's aligned with the same requirement. Now they mentioned here that technical controls needs to be implemented to prevent such kind of activities while using remote access technologies. Okay. Yes, obviously the explicit authorization, if it is a business requirement, you can do that, but there should be some explicit authorization for that. Another change in this is hashed hashes used to render PAN unreadable also. Entire PAN with associated key management process and procedures to be implemented. So this is also one of the new requirement, but it's a little elaborated. The hashed PANs and hashed values and the PANs cannot be together to any kind of somebody can use the specific techniques to gather that clear test PAN using these two. So this is something you can they actually given more guidance on that. Disk level and partition level encrypted to render PAN unreadable on removable electronic medium. So this is also very clearly now mentioned. If any non-removable electronic media also it should be on PANs, if they are stored, it should be unreadable. So this is one of the clear statement given in 3.5.1. So it's very earlier it was only the disk level encryption. If applicable, the disk level encryption controls needs to be implemented. But here now the new requirement talks about implement disk level encryption and even our partition level encryption to render PAN unreadable wherever it is stored. Okay. Architecture description, cryptography architecture is maintained to prevent the cryptographic keys production and environment test environments also. So this is second change. Requirement for certificates used to safeguard PAN during transmission over open, public, and networks are confirmed as valid and are not expired or revoked. So this is very clearly they mentioned now because earlier it was like only the PAN needs to be encrypted, but by using any kind of certificates or anything. This is one of the earlier statement, but now the current 4.0 it talks about how safely the PAN transmitted during if you are using the open and public networks, and they already given some specific information like checking whether the certificates are issued by the trusted source or not, and whether they are up to date certificate revocation list or not. So the certificates are not expired by checking all these protocols and etc. to validate the certificates. This is what in the 4.1 they added now. And also the inventory of entities, trusted keys and certificates to be maintained. Yeah, this is also one of the new requirement, but earlier it was not like this. So any company, whatever they are using to protect the encryption keys and certificates have to be just like asset inventory. You have to maintain all your key algorithms, key strength, and key custodians, and as well as the keys, everything you have to maintain it separately and protect it.
Okay, Vamshi, there is a requirement saying that requirement 3. Can you explain the last slide?
This one? Architecture, no, this one, it talks about the documented description of the cryptography. I mean, you see, it is also, it's like earlier 3.2.1 is also, they asked if the organizations are implemented key management. Okay, so there should be a document to be maintained, like what kind of a keys they used, what is the algorithms of the keys, what is the key strength of that keys, and etc. In the current 4.0 also, they are talking about the similar kind of a thing, but it is there more, they mentioned about cryptographic architectures, like what kind of architecture which you are using to protect the data, and you have to explain how you are using that, and what kind of algorithms you are using, what kind of protocols you are using, etc. You have to definitely, you have to put it in the document, so that the entire mechanism of generating of the keys to protecting the keys will be, it has to be defined and documented as per the organization practices. Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead.
Yeah. So inventory of the things, yes, and now if you look at the fifth requirement, the change. Okay, okay. There is another question is, what is the untrusted networks means, as per the fourth requirement? Untrusted, anything, I mean, as per the standard, or as per the understanding, the wireless, like wireless networks, carriers, or third-party networks, or even sources of the entities, I mean, the ability to control. So we just consider as it is a untrusted networks. Even for example, sometimes, even the corporate networks also sometimes can be considered, if they are not part of the scope of the assessment or scope of the PCI DSS, we consider it's a untrusted networks. Okay, in the nutshell, anything which is the organization is not control that entire network, we can consider that is an untrusted network. Okay, so that's a simple thumb rule for this. Okay. Yes, as I mentioned, wireless networks, and other carrier networks. Yes, GPRS. So all these are internet. Yeah, obviously internet is the untrusted network. So all these are considered to be untrusted. Even Bluetooth also is a untrusted network only. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So coming to the third requirement, fifth requirement, protect all system components, systems and networks from malicious software. So it depends on a targeted risk analysis is performed. A risk analysis should be performed by the organization to determine the frequency of periodic evaluation of system components. Okay. So it means what? Earlier also it was touched upon, but earlier it only states that periodic evaluation has to be performed for those system components who don't have used any antivirus malware software. So this is something the earlier one, but now it is expanded to all the system components now, and the networks also. The organization can perform some risk analysis. Depends on their environment, what kind of, if it is a banking environment, the risk is more. If it is a some kind of a service providers, or they don't have access to the cardholder data or something, the risk levels will vary. It depends on the organization. They can conduct a risk analysis properly. Okay, and then they can define the periodicity to perform periodicity further, so they can define it. Okay. Frequency of periodic malware scans. So earlier it was like weekly scans or daily scans or something, but now you can have your own risk assessment methodology to analyze the risk as per your organization, define the frequencies for updates, and as well as the scans also. So this is one of the flexibility as given now. Anti-malware scans are performed when removable electronic media is in use, obviously, because whenever within your network, if anything is entry for and like the USB connections or maybe new connections, it can impact your cardholder data environment. So now, now it is very clearly mentioned that whenever whenever you are using any external source, then it should be electronic media if you are using. So it should be properly scanned for any kind of a malwares. It is a new requirement. It's mainly applicable for the USB and flash drives. Okay. Phishing attacks, yeah, this is something, the new requirement, as I mentioned. This is the new, as per the new technologies and the current threat environments. So now you have to implement the specific mechanisms to protect from any kind of a phishing attacks. So some of the examples as given: anti-spoofing controls, the basically like domain-based message authentications, or DMARC, or SPF, and DKIM to stop phishers from spoofing your systems. Okay, so this is also one of the new requirements. So this will take care of the phishing kind of attacks in the organization. Yeah, requirement 6 mainly talks about the develop and maintain secure systems and softwares, maintain an inventory of bespoke and custom software to facilitate vulnerability and patch management. So because it's earlier also the vulnerability management they mentioned about depends on the risk depends on the risk. People can maintain the vulnerability management, depends on the risk levels, the high, medium, low risk levels you can put up that. So currently also, but you have to maintain the inventory right now. What kind of a custom softwares which you are using within the organization, and how you maintain the vulnerabilities, and how you manage the vulnerabilities there. So this is something this is also new requirement. Deploy automated technical solution for public facing web application, because this is something very important. Earlier it's not, they didn't mention automated technical solution because they mentioned only if you are using any web application firewalls or something, you can use it for protecting from protecting the web applications. But now very clearly they mentioned now deploy an automated technical solution for public facing web application. So these are the probably the public facing web applications is one of the primary targets for so many attacks, and it's fully evident to everyone. So because of keeping this requirement, maybe they talking about put some robust controls to technical controls to avoid such kind of an attacks. So that's what I can see that. Okay. Manual. So definitely when they're very clearly now they're mentioning about automated technical solutions, automate technical solutions to be implemented to protect this public facing web application, then definitely the earlier the requirement is like review web application via manual or automated application vulnerability assessment tools will be removed, because it is a mandatory now. So there is no option now. I think it is a mandatory to implement technical control. So manage all payment pay scripts that are loaded and executed in the consumer browser. So this is also one of the new requirement. So earlier there was no such kind of requirement here, but now you have to, as an organization, you have to manage all page. I mean, if you are supporting the scripts from your browser, then you have to manage all that scripts. Okay, so definitely, I think this can be if you are properly implementing this, you can avoid middle in the man in middle attacks or something like this. So this is there. Actually, now they're talking about you how to control this. Restrict access to system components and cardholder data by business need to know, because earlier it was like cardholder data, but now actually they restrict access to system components. Both they have mentioned here. Review at least once every 6 months. You have to review. Review all user accounts. Earlier, it's not very clear, but normally the access control rules needs to be reviewed every quarterly. But now at least they're mentioning at least once every 6 months you have to do that. And obviously the role-based access controls needs to be implemented properly. Any inappropriate access is addressed, and management acknowledges the access remains appropriate. So it means that the review process has to be conducted here. So the significant change is like every 6 months you have to review all user accounts. That is one of the significant changes happened. And definitely other things like application system accounts and related access privileges appropriately. So so all the system components which you are using, whether it is application, whether it is a databases, or whether it is a networks or servers, everything, the the least privileges to be assigned, and also it needs to be verified every 6 months. Okay, so this is again, it is applicable for entire cardholder data environment, even the cardholder data. Okay, this is very important. Periodically at the frequency according to all elements, review all access by application, system accounts, and related access privileges to be reviewed. Suppose if somewhere the review process has to be most strengthened. In this case, what I can see that, okay, and access rights are provisions of access rights, and what kind of system components having what kind of access from which what kind of user roles, if it is required or not required. So all these things should happen in this particular requirement. Another one, the password thing, the 8th requirement. If you look at that, earlier it was like 7 characters. So many times we come across the organization, hey, PCI only talks about minimum 7 characters. So now actually, I guess that's what I think. There's a good feedback to them. So it's now become a 12 characters length, and if suppose if your components, if your systems does not support 12 characters, then the minimum length of 8 characters can be implemented. So it means either it is 8 or it's a 12. If your systems, again, it depends on the assessors. They can validate this, whether if your systems are supported in such condition, you have to implement 12 minimum passwords. And definitely the complexity has to be complex, enabled complexity needs to be enabled, like it should be a combination of the numeric and alphabetic characters. Okay. Yeah. And further, the 90 days now, because it's not only the passwords, because even the passphrases, if the organizations are using passwords or passphrases as the only authentication factor, definitely the 90 days, at least you have to maintain the 90 days. But if you look at that, it is applicable for the passwords and passphrases as well. Okay. Service providers, additional requirements for service providers. This is not really multi-factor authentication for all access into the CDA. Earlier, if you remember, multi-factor. So basically, the 8th requirement is very, very important to know the changes, because they much more emphasis on the password strengthening to multi-factor authentication. Now the multi-factor authentication is applicable for all access to the CDE environment. Earlier, it was only from the remote access, the multi-factor authentication is required, and privileged users multi-factor authentication, administrative access only the multi-factor authentication is required as per the earlier version. But now, if you look at this, multi-factor authentication is applicable, needs to be implemented for all access to the CDE environment. So this is one of the major change. I can see that. It's going to be everywhere. You have to use the multi-factor only. If you are accessing any component in the CD environment, then you have to use the multi-factor authentication. Okay. So basically someone is asking that 5 point. So multi-factor is fine. Then MFA systems are implemented. I know you can choose again. Any attackers can bypass your multi-factor authentication systems or not. You have to confirm. You have to choose that. Okay, and at least as you multi-factor, the definition itself, you can use 2 different types of authentication factors to be used. And all the whatever authentication mechanisms you are opted for that, it's not like earlier 2-factor authentication. Don't confuse with the 2-factor authentication with the multi-factor. Now you have the flexibility to add much more factors into that. So, but before granting any access to that particular component to the particular user, it should pass all the authentication factors being implemented. So this is one of the change. So multi-factor is, just remember, multi-factor now required to access all the CDs. Also, interactive use, interactive user is prevented unless needed for an exceptional circumstances. Interactive login for accounts used by systems or applications. So basically, it's very simple. Manage interactive logins for accounts used by systems and applications. So you have to, it's not like only the user ID password, because there is different ways you can, reconfirm the logins, particular users in the, before providing the access to them. Individual user identity is confirmed before access to account is granted. So definitely every action taken is attributable to the individual user. So basically it's a simple, before granting any access to any user, you have to identify the user before providing any access. It is not a new requirement, but what I can see that I can see that they are very clearly stated certain requirements here. They're putting their expectations very clearly. Password passphrases for any applications and system accounts that can be used for interactive logins are not hard-coded in the scripts. Please remember this. It means you cannot put up any hard-coded credentials in the script, so it's automatically execute that. So every time it has to, the user supposed to provide the logins, the required information to gain the access of the system components. Okay. Definitely in the ninth requirement, the physical access to cardholder data, definitely you have to have the risk analysis to be performed to determine the frequency of POI device inspections, because earlier I think it is like a yearly once you have to do that, but now you have to do the risk analysis, and according to the risk analysis, whatever the outcomes of the risk analysis, you can define the frequency for inspecting the point of interaction devices. So this is something which they added now. And also audit logs reviews are automated. So this is one of the another change here, because I can see that earlier it is just mentioned that either way, whether it is automated or manual, but now because manually it is highly impossible to review all the logs, so difficult to analyze the logs, but now it is mentioned very categorically, audit log reviews should be automated. When I say automated, the organization is supposed to use the specific solutions to maintain the logs and also the reviewing the logs. So I think this is also one of the major change. I can see it impact the organizations. Definitely going forward, we will more work out on this, how the organization can be implemented. So
I think,
yeah,
Vamshi, there is some issue.
Hello, sir.
We are not able to hear you.
Hello.
No, I think I am able to hear Vamshi clearly, Venkat.
Anybody is facing the
sorry for
same
the
challenge?
No, so you are.
That's fine. I think we can hear now.
Yeah, I think he was audible and we didn't lose him for any time. It was consistently audible.
Yeah. Okay. If somebody is not able to hear me, please let me know. Okay, because okay. So what is my point is that like the password complexity increases, the password length, and MFA they now mandated to all the CD access, and now the logs has to be multi-factor needs to be implemented for all the CD access, and now they're talking about the monitoring of the logs should be automated. So I can see all these are could impact the current existing organizations who are already PCI DSS certified. So I think this is one of the major changes. Coming to the periodic log reviews, also basis on your risk analysis, you can determine what kind of a periodic log reviews you want to perform. It depends on the complexity of your organization. So there is a flexibility point. You can define your risk analysis basis on the risk analysis results. You can define your own frequencies. Okay. And any system components are failed or system controls are failed, that needs to be that needs to be detected, alerted, and addressed promptly. Because earlier it was like network security systems, if they are failed, like firewall or something, that needs to be logged on, and that needs to be analyzed, the root cause and everything. But actually now here they are talking about any security control systems are failed. So it has to be documented properly, and perform some kind of analysis to determine why it was failed, and all the consequences of that. Yeah, I mean, this is addressing the failures of the critical security control systems, like how effectively, how quickly you will work on that, and determine what is the any kind of root cause analysis, and how you can take the some kind of actions which can prevent such kind of failures in future. So or during that particular period, is there any attacks are happened, or any other malicious things are happened in your systems or not? This is also something you need to focus right now. Coming to the requirement 11, authenticated scanning. This is also very important change happened. Now all the internal vulnerability scans are performed by authenticated scanning only. So basically, earlier it was non-authentic. I mean, earlier it was not mentioned very clearly. Kalpesh, is that something like authenticated and non-authenticated? It's only mentioned about penetration testings, if I'm not wrong, right?
Yes,
So
earlier it was not clearly mentioned whether it is authenticated or unauthenticated. And general by thumb rule, the industry or all the companies majorly used to go for unauthenticated scans. But now they have clearly mentioned that authenticated scans are required. Okay, going forward after 31st March 2025. This will be one of the big requirements, because directly shifting from unauthenticated scans to authenticated scans might result in increased costing, as well as increased efforts for compliance towards this requirement. And if it is the area is not segmented, then even it will be even more problems. Okay, so companies must gear up starting to go for authenticated scans at the earliest. That is what we have been suggesting to all our companies and all our clients right now.
okay. Okay, thanks, Kalpesh. Actually, now it is become they are asking only the authenticated scannings only now. Yeah, I mean, definitely it will impact the current organization practices. They have to look into that really, you know. And also one more very important key change happened is multi-tenant service providers, like hosting service providers or somebody, because earlier there was a kind of excuse like if penetration testing, it may impact to the other customers, which they are actually rendering. So now it's very clearly mentioned, multi-tenant service providers cannot forbid penetration testing, because this would leave their other customers open to exploitation. So it means that any entity like such kind of a multi-tenant service providers, they have to perform the external penetration testing. Okay. But this is particularly for those service providers who are actually serving to multiple customers. So, so this is one of the, again, one more change is happened. For example, this is also new requirement for the service providers, and covert malware communication channels to be detected and alerted, prevent, address via intrusion detection and prevention techniques. So earlier also IDS IPS is requirement, but now they added this part, malware communication channels should be detected. So this is one of the new element here. Earlier it was not like that. So even though IDS IPS is still applicable, but you have to see how it attempt to detect and prevent such kind of a communication channels. A change, earlier it was like a file integrity monitoring checks. Now it's again the requirement still is applicable, the solution is still applicable here, but the change in tamper detection mechanisms should be deployed for payment pages particularly. So this is very, very important because there is no, earlier it was simply like all critical files needs to be monitored for their, any changes in the file systems. But now it is very clearly added one more point is any payment pages, the tamper detection mechanism needs to be deployed. So this is um, for payment pages. So this is one of the requirement. And 12th requirement talks about targeted risk analysis. So it is one of the change is happened. Each PCI DSS requirement that provides flexibility, like every requirement wise, you can perform some risk analysis, and basis on the risk analysis, you can mention what kind of a frequency you want to follow, depends on your organization risk appetites and etc, and particular control how you want to implement that particular control if you are choosing the customized approach. Okay, so this is very, very important element. So now I can see that the PCA is mainly focusing on the objectives and risk analysis. So it's good that they're getting into this risk based control mechanisms. The review of each targeted risk analysis at least once every 12 months. So this is definitely earlier it was only the risk assessment to be reviewed every minimum annually, but now yes, they are talking about risk analysis to be performed every 12 months basis on whether the results of the earlier risk analysis is still valid or not valid. So that is something there it says right now. Performance of updated risk analysis when needed as determined the annual review. So how the risk analysis is performed. So basis on the reviews, you can re-update, re-reply that one. Further, it is added the Appendix D in the customized approach, the templates which they have added right now. So we are not touching that point because that is Appendix D. Customized approach, for example, this is the guidelines for the assessment bodies also, how to implement the customized approach, how to determine, how to validate the customized approach requirements. So these are something mentioned in this particular Appendix D. Cryptographic cipher suits and protocols in use are documented and reviewed at least 12 months. So up-to-date inventory of all, as I mentioned, up-to-date inventory of all cryptographic cipher suits and protocols in use, including purpose and where it is used. That is also you have to maintain that. And also whether they are suitable for the current trends, current changes in the industry. So you have to monitor. There should be some monitoring mechanism whether whatever you are using, the cryptography architecture, the protocols and algorithms, whether they are up to the mark and whether they still are valid, to use. This is something which we can it has to happen. Okay. Any kind of a vulnerabilities related to the cryptographic controls, anticipated vulnerabilities needs to be how to prevent that such kind of a situations. You have to document a proper strategy. So this is also one of the important. And hardware and software needs to be reviewed at least 12 months. This is one thing. And also any changes in the significant change in the scope environment, you have to document. So this is also very important. Actually, most of the time, what happens here, the CHD environment, the CD environment, no one really document that scope. Earlier, it was only applied for the designated entities. But now, for each and every organization, the PCI DSS scope document has to be documented and confirmed at least every 12 months. Or any significant change is happening with respect to the change. Okay. Yeah, I mean, significant change. Okay, someone is asking what is a significant change is. Significant change is nothing but whatever the environment which you are working. It can be new hardware or new softwares. New systems are added into the CD that can be considered as a significant change. It depends on the organization environment, or major upgrades happen on the softwares and etc hardwares, that can be also significant change. Or maybe the new business processes are added into your environment, or maybe the new flows new flows are added, new business processes are incorporated or added in your existing system, that can be also considered the significant change. It depends on the given environment, what kind of environment we are accessing. According to that, you can define what is the significant change. But okay, overall, any major changes on your infrastructure or your hardware or software or applications or the business line of services, all these considered to be a significant change. And support and okay, so document convey entity at least once every 6 months and upon significant change in the scope environment. At a minimum, the scoping validation includes all elements specified in the requirement 12.5.2. So as I mentioned, you have to see whether the frequency of the scope documented review. So, it depends on the complexity of our organization. You can see that. Yeah, again, it is related to the significant changes and scoping the organization, whether whether organization is documented it or not. Okay, you can see the significant changes. Awareness program, at least 12 months, the awareness program has to be reviewed. So earlier it was like performing the training programs and awareness training programs, that is a requirement. But now what they're asking is you have to review your awareness training program, whether it is adequate enough to address your current organization requirements. So this is very important. And also seems they are more concerned about the effective implementation of this training, or maybe the effectiveness of the training. Okay, so this is also very important to understand. Just simply by providing the training is not good enough. Whether it is really the people understand the intent of that program and they are really educated about the specific context. That's also very important, and very important to you should organization take the responsibility to inform, or the people who are attended, that whether they understand their roles very well and they understand the importance of protecting this cardholder data is also very important. So this is the very intent of this awareness training programs. Yes, as I mentioned, it should cover all these things, like awareness of various threats and impact of the threats, how it impact the security of the CDE, or importance of understanding the phishing attacks and how to prevent such kind of phishing attacks. Because even today also there are a lot of people not understand really how what kind of emails they may receive. So, but now it's very clearly now they are added these components. So definitely, when we are assessing any organization, we will look into that organization programs, and we will see what can do. TSPS support customers PCD's compliance status. So TPSP is a third party service providers. Okay, and this is again earlier also in the 3.2.1 it was same. It was there like third party supplier relationships and etc. Third party suppliers. So TSP, third party supplier program. Basically here what they're talking about is TPSP support customers request to provide. So basically you have to confirm before appointing any TPSPs how the specific requirement they will going to meet the specific requirement. What is their responsibilities? Your responsibility and their responsibility. It has to be very clearly mentioned in the responsibility matrix. And further, yeah, I mean this is very important. Like how you differentiated the responsibility, how you determine who is responsible for what, how they will support you to achieve your PCI DSS compliance status as well. Okay, at the same time, the next incident response, the periodic training for the incident personnel is defined now, defined according to all requirements specified in the 12.3.1, the frequency of periodic and basis on again, it's a periodic risk analysis. You can determine the frequency of these trainings as well. Alerts and security monitoring systems, initiation upon detection of the PAN. If the pose, yes, you should have something like earlier they provided some of the examples, but now this time they are very clearly mentioned what is your security incident response plan. That plan should include in some cases wherein there is a any system monitoring systems, any alerts you received, how you will how you will act on that, or maybe any detection of the pan, how you will act on that. So these are some of the elements which they are added now. And every organization, when they're defining the incident response plan, they should also consider all these, things, while preparing the plans. Um, Yeah, I think this is the last slide. So basically, what I can see here in the significant changes starting from the beginning to end. One is they much focused, on the risk analysis now. Point number one. It's a kind of a summary which I'm talking. Risk analysis everywhere the organization is supposed to follow, analyze the risk as per their organization environment. Point number one. Basis on that, they can define the frequencies for various activities, like training programs or reviewing certain things. You can define your frequencies as per the risk analysis. It means it is risk analysis or risk assessment plays very important role uh, coming to implement this 4.0. This point number one. Second one is the roles and responsibilities is it's not like very high level. You have to be very clear with every requirement wise, who is actually responsible, what is their role, whether they properly it is documented or not documented, communicated or not communicated. So this is also one of the change is happened. The further the mostly the changes which I have seen is in the requirement 8, the password policy has been changed. The multi-factor authentication has been changed. Now they mandated to all the CDE access. Password policy has been changed from 7 to 8 minimum, and 12 if your systems are if system components are supports, then you have to use the 12 character passwords with the complexity. And as well as the audit log monitoring is also one of the audit log monitoring needs to be automated now. So far there is no much clarity on the what kind of a tools they should use, or manual or automated. So now it is very clear you have to use the organization supposed to use the automated solution to monitor these logs. And that's also one of the major change. I guess it impacts definitely to all the organizations. And also the first one is it's like earlier, like the firewalls and routers is one of the traditional network devices names. But being, we know that now most of the organizations are actually going on the converted into the cloud. They have started using cloud infrastructure. Now there is no significant problem, because now you can define your own. They only mentioned about network security controls. That's very simple thing. So this is also one of the major change happened here. So there is a clash, the traditional names being used in the standard, and current the technology is something different. So coming together, maybe implementing the same controls on the different environment. Maybe this requirement one change, whatever they mentioned right now, network security controls, definitely it will help organization to determine what kind of controls they can implement. Third requirement again, yeah, in nutshell, the cryptography, the SAD data needs to be encrypted with a strong cryptography. That is also one of the major change happened. That's also. And yeah, and fifth requirement, as I mentioned, anti-malware solution depends on the frequency. You can define it. Depends on the risk analysis. You can define the frequency of the updates and regular scannings. So I think more or less, these are the major changes. Changes. It may impact the existing organizations, but still it is very early to say anything, because this is the standards has been published now. There will be little more brainstorming happen between the interested parties, and maybe there are some new things, new interpretations may come up in near future. So I hope this session is useful for everyone who are attending this. We are ready to take up the questions now one by one, and also we are going to plan one one session on the only understanding the requirement one by one, the requirements, because this session is only identifying what kind of a major changes are happened as per the 4.0. And we are ready for take the questions now. Kalpesh and Venkat, I hope.
Yeah.
No, thank you everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Vamshi.
Thank you, Vamshi.
Mr. Dinesh has raised his Abhishek, can you help in keeping him live?
Hello. Yes, sir. Hello, can you hear, sir?
Yeah, we can hear.
I'm asking about AnyDex. AnyDex is suitable for remote support or not? It's
I
risky.
think I have already answered this question, sir, in the chat Q&A.
Okay.
Please refer to that, sir.
Okay, thanks.
I don't see any raised hands after this. If anybody wants to have any additional questions, they can raise their hand.
Hi, sir. There are a few questions in the Q&A. You can take them.
Rahim has raised his hand. If you can just.
Mr. Alpesh is asking, can we store card number forever for business requirements? Okay, this is a if you go for PCI, then they are always mentioning that account data or card data must be stored to a minimum. Okay, in terms of retention or in terms of the coverage. Okay, so if you don't need it, the thumb rule is don't store it. And while the retention policy can be defined by individual entity, but it is it has to be in accordance with the applicable laws. So if your law say it has to be 7 years, then please do not store it beyond 7 years, because the more you store, the more controls you have to put in terms of encryption, in terms of storage, etc. And a long-term retention is definitely not advisable, because there can be several issues at a later stage. So keep it as a bare minimum with respect to a number of years, as well as what you need to store. For example, if you need only pen, don't store expiry and name as well. So that is what I have to say. And Venkat, you can add anything if I'm missing.
No, that's it. I don't have any.
Yes.
Anything to add?
Mr. C.A. Satish Gupta.
Mr. Rahim, you can ask your question.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you for arranging this great session. My question is regarding the cloud security controls that right now organizations are moving towards cloud. So in terms of the PCI DSS version 4.0 version, what are the specific controls which are recommended for any organization moving towards cloud? Thanks.
Okay, so I got the question. Okay, this question would have been more valid for 3.2.1 since there were specific firewalls or routers, etc. But come version 4, the council has changed the wording from network security controls or system components. Okay, so to answer your query, all the system components, whether it is on-premise or cloud or anywhere else, must be having the same level of access controls which are mentioned in the standard. So a server stored in the cloud doesn't have any differentiation with the server that is stored on premise. Okay, so anything and everything that stores, process, or transmit cardholder data must be having appropriate version 4 controls, even if it is in cloud.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, I think someone is asked like if any new company apply for PCI DSS, which version you suggest? This is the question. Sir, as I mentioned during my session, currently 3.2.1 is valid, and maybe hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Kalpesh.
Hello. Yeah. Someone is asking like which PCI DSS is applicable if some company
Kalpesh.
wants to.
Can I ask?
Hi, Prashant. Give me a second. Please continue with the explanation.
Yeah. So basically, the question is which PCI DSS is applicable. So organization can after second, because you can start implementing 4.0 as well. But the thing is that after Q2, the quarter two of 2022, only the qualified assessors also will be ready to evaluate your system. So it depends on you. But the question is like immediately it's a 3.2.1 because even though the 4.0 is there, but other supporting documents will be released, and the assessors needs to be trained on this particular new requirement, new standard. So obviously it will take another 3 months. They will start, and maybe another 6 months the assessors companies will be ready for taking up such kind of assignments. But yeah, implementation point of view, you can start on the 4.0, but please remember the 3.2.1 still valid till 2024 March. So you will get the transition. You can in between you can transit from 3.2.1 to 4.0. So that's all from my side.
Hello, can I ask?
Yes, Pankaj, continue.
Okay, so there are two questions from my side. One is that in 3.2.1 also there is some direction given for cloud hosting, because cloud hosting migration is happening for the last 3-4 years, including big banks and the financial institute. But the query is that there are multiple models are there in the cloud hosting. I mean, if you talk about a fintech, it is not exactly the conventional way, the kind of co-location environment where you can create a protection that is happening, because you have virtual VM-based scenario, which is we call it IaaS solutions. Then you have a service-based scenario when you talk about as a PaaS solutions. So exactly the controls which you talked about in 3.2.1 in terms of those are more mainly directed to the conventional co-locations or your own conventional data center-based applications setup. That exactly doesn't apply to your kind of cloud-based scenario. So there could be something. In fact, PCI DSS Council also mentioned that what are the controls and other things there, which we have to find out from the IaaS and the PaaS, but there is no very specific things which is defined in terms of protections, in terms of what level of certification is required when a QSA comes for auditing your cloud-based backend. So I do not know whether any such directions or any kind of benchmarks list has come for this 4, because that was not existing, that was missing in 3.2.1. That is question number 1. Question number 2 is that when you talk about these SAD data to be, I mean, earlier there is no provisions of storing the SAD. The moment the authorization happens, you have to delete. But now that in a digital world now it is talking about that offline retail transactions. Okay, when your multiple authorizations related scenarios also happening in your POS terminal, where you are actually doing the transactions on the shops, on the merchant world. Secondly, there is a case which is, it is coming under the smart cities where you do the offline transit payment. So the transit terminal where you are doing the tapping and the cards, that is on SAD is happening. These two things are basically can go from minutes to hours or to some days also. That is the government panel is saying that you are supposed to store the scenario for few days also, in case if you are not being able to go out to the online. So when you talk about that, is there anything that mentioned that SAD data minimum period to maximum period protected storage is allowed or something? These are the two questions from my side. Thank you very much.
Okay, to answer your first question, as I mentioned, okay, earlier 3.21 was more focused and since it was an extension of version 1, 2, and 3, more focused on on-premise data centers with firewalls, routers, and physical devices. So that's why if you see the standard specifically mentioned that deploy a secure firewall, etc. But now with 4, the council has removed those restrictions or boundaries, and they are directly naming as network components or network security or network configuration system components, which will cover anything in the cloud or on premise. So it is a broad term which will cover any system component or any appliance or any device which is storing, processing, or handling cardholder data. Okay. first part. Second part is while any cloud certifications or any other industry benchmark standard you have implemented, that can be leveraged upon a case-to-case basis, but that cannot directly imply that once you have implemented that standard, PCI DSS version 4 is automatically compliant. So though you may have deployed some cloud-based standards or some cloud-based controls, all those controls, irrespective of any certification, will be validated by a QSA during the audit. Till what depth, that depends on a case-to-case basis. Okay. So that is the first question, answer to the first question. Second question, when you mentioned about storage, okay, irrespective of the storage, whether it is for 1 millisecond, 1 second, or 1 year, the appropriate amount of controls, whatever are mentioned in the PCI version 4 or version 3, must be deployed, irrespective of the time duration. Okay, your retention policy can be anything. But the moment you are storing something on your disk or something as a part of your cardholder data, all encryption controls, key management, and all appropriate levels of controls must be deployed irrespective of the duration. This is what I have to say on both your queries. And Vamshi, Venkat, please add if I have missed anything.
I think that is good enough, Gurnesh.
I mean, my question was mainly that is there any time limitation? You said that there is no time limitations, but I mean, as long as it is being stored, it is to having the standard practice of your security elements to be used for that.
So if Pankaj, actually regarding the SAD, there is they mentioned only in the standard they only mentioned about the minimum time only. But only thing is that it depends on your context. We can see whether whatever the minimum time or maximum time which you mentioned for the retention is acceptable or not acceptable. Okay, because this is not fit for the same answer cannot be fit into the different organizations. So it depends on the context. We can see that, but yes, there is nowhere mentioned what is the maximum period you can save the SAT data. Okay, but only thing is the condition is before the authorization you can store it. But again, they mentioned you can use it in a minimum time, but they didn't mention anywhere what is the minimum and what is the maximum. So it means it is up to the organization to determine what is the minimum period they want to store it before authorization, or maximum period they want to store it before authorization. However, after authorization, you are not supposed to store the SAT data. Okay, so it depends on the organization to organization. We can see that whether it is acceptable or not acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
So I think I can see one more question as open in the Q&A. The query is, my query is regarding how we manage session timeout period in between applications, specifically, especially in payment application. Okay, the session timeout, as per the defined control requirement in R8, user session timeout has been defined as 15 minutes. But if you're talking specifically between middleware and applications or between two applications, that depends upon the session, what you have defined or what is ideally required for a transaction to be gone through, etc. So while there is a user idle timeout session defined as 15 minutes, there is no application to application session timeout which has been defined in my knowledge, and that can be as per the transaction authorization or your payment processor or payment bank or brand, whatever is you are interacting with, what they have set the timeout, you have to abide by that. So any other queries? Any other queries anybody have? Please let us know.
I think someone is raised. Rohit Kadam is raised his hand.
Yes, please unmute and speak.
Yes, please.
Hello. Hello.
Yes,
Please, Mr. Rohit.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
Yeah, good evening, sir.
So my query is that, sir, while we are using a multiple application, like in banking application, there are the channel partner, then business correspondent, then banking processor, where the Finacle, Fin1 means every bank can have a multiple application where they work on. Okay, so whenever they are designing the API integration, okay, so there is a timeout period is majorly defined in between the two parameters. Okay. But when they are designing the APIs in actual manner, that time there is a miscommunication or maybe a misguidance. Okay. Where we observe, we observe like the later on we get to know this is the actual timeout period in between the bank and the NPCI node, for example. Okay. And less timeout period is managed by the internal teams in between the channel partner. So the transaction failure ratio become high. And in such issues, while we observing through the logs, transaction log, that time everybody is like a multiple vendor are working on a single application. So they are pointing to the others one. This issue is from your application, this issue from your application. So when this is going to be sorted out means what is the solution for that to fix the issue?
If I understand your question correctly, this is more from an operational perspective rather than a PCI DSS version 3.2.1 or 4 perspective. The transaction timeout has to be defined within the application and as per your company policy or as per the requirement of the operational transactional success ratio. Okay. PCI doesn't mandate anything on talking between two APIs or between middlewares or anything like that. Whatever is defined is the clearly user timeout session, which has to be 15 minutes, that is defined. But if you're talking about if the transaction is failing and if one software vendor is pointing on the other, then I think this greatly will be dependent upon your company policies, your enforcement with vendors and your critical success transaction ratio, etc., etc. So that is something which your management has to look into it. So it's more of an operational query rather than a PCI DSS compliance query.
Means, sir, shall we hold a session for the 15 minutes then?
See, it depends upon you. You can hold the session if your company policy or your management or your decision maker say you have to complete this transaction within so and so minute. Because if you see every bank, if you go to ATM, there is a timeout. If you perform some online transaction, there is a timeout. So it depends on each and every individual how fast or how slow they want to complete this transaction. So PCI doesn't mandate anything on performing the transaction within 30 seconds or 30 minutes.
I can give you the example, sir. Sorry to interrupt. For example, 122nd is a timeout in between the bank and NPCI. Okay. But while bank is giving a business correspondence API session, that time they allow only 60 minutes. Okay. So if the original request is failed within 60 seconds, then verified request is completed within next 60 seconds. So in such a timeout period, bank even doesn't know the issue is exactly like that. And later on, they are saying you have to check with the Finacle team, then you have to check with the middleware. So they always like as a point out, but nobody is look into the root cause. What is the exact root cause? So if there is a 15 minutes is the timeout period. So if we are holding a session for 15 minutes, then there is an impact for the upcoming transaction or the queuing transactions.
As I mentioned, sir, this is mostly towards your operational issues and operational challenges. It has very little to do with what PCI DSS compliance says. But to answer your query, yes, you will have to talk to all the vendors under a single roof, in my opinion, in my limited knowledge, and get this rectified along with your senior management key maker decisions in the call. But it has nothing to do with PCI DSS as far as I can understand, sir.
Okay, sir.
So I think there is one more hand which is raised. I'm not.
So that was
Rohit. I think all the questions were answered.
Okay. Okay.
We are good to go.
I think almost like we have answered almost like 40 questions now.
And much more in QA and personal as well, I guess.
Yeah, right. You're right. So I think now we can conclude the session. Abhishek, I guess
Yes.
if there are no questions, and thank you very much for attending our session. And please, visit our website and our pages so that we are coming up with much more training sessions on the 4.0 please start visit our website for getting the new information. And thank you very much. Thanks, Kalpesh and Venkat for answering all the questions, and thanks Abhishek for arranging this webinar and facilitating this. Thank you, everyone. If somebody is having any further questions or anything, we have you can just drop your info@qrcsolutions.com. You can just drop your questions here, and we will definitely answer all your questions. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yes, already we have given our email ID there. Okay, and you please use that email ID for sending your questions here. Okay, I hope you can see you again in our upcoming sessions. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Vamshi. Thanks,
Thank you.
Venkat. Thank you, everyone.
Kalpesh.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Abhishek. Yeah.